So you'll probably know that Kyogre and Groudon, the legendary Pokemon of the Hoenn region, can control the land and the sea. But how? Kyogre and Groudon's ability to control the weather are clearly seen in the Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald games, and what one Pokemon does seems to counteract what the other Pokemon does, so you can assume that what one Pokemon does is the opposite to what the other Pokemon does, and therefore, if you can come up with a theory for what one Pokemon is doing, you also have a theory for what the other Pokemon is doing, and this can also work as a test for your theory. If it works for the other Pokemon, then it's a good theory. If it doesn't, then it needs refining. So let's look at Groudon in particular. In the games, Groudon seems to have two effects. The first one being to heat up the environment, the second one being to reduce the amount of rain. Both of these contribute to mini droughts. Now, rain obviously comes from clouds, but clouds tend to form more often in low pressure environments, so if you were to increase the air pressure, you'll be able to decrease the amount of clouds forming and therefore decrease the amount of rain. And you can do this by rapidly increasing the temperature of the environment. This is the sort of effect we see in summer and winter. That's why you get less clouds in summer and more clouds in winter, except if you're living in England. So it seems as though the two effects that I mentioned Groudon had before are intertangled, and one causes the other. So it's more likely that Groudon only does one, which then causes the other. So it's likely that Groudon just heats up the environment, which then increases the air pressure, which then decreases the amount of rain. You might be wanting to say that Groudon just heats up the environment, and this is something I always thought when I was playing the games through as a child, although this isn't really very scientific, and you haven't even considered whether this is feasible or not. And surprise, surprise, it's not. It would take a huge amount of energy to make any significant change to the temperature of the environment. It would just be infeasible for a single Pokemon to output this amount of energy. To put this in perspective, I came up with some assumptions which I can make some calculations out of. Now, my assumptions are a little bit overgeneralized and wouldn't normally be useful, however, they are useful for coming up with a general idea of how much energy will be required. So my assumptions are as follows. Groudon just heats up the environment of Hoenn and up to the top of the troposphere. The troposphere is the lowest layer of the atmosphere. It makes up about 80% of the atmosphere. It's where all the weather occurs, where the weather systems, it's generally where life is livable. Hoenn is based off the island of Kyushu in Japan, so we can assume they both cover a similar area, which is 36,000 kilometers squared, and the troposphere on average is about 15 kilometers up, so we can use these two values to find the volume of the gas we want to heat up. The average temperature of the troposphere is about 6.5 degrees Celsius. It's much warmer at land and much colder at the top of the troposphere, but on average it's about 6.5 degrees Celsius. The same logic can be applied to the pressure, which is about 50 kilopascals on average. Now, to heat up the environment just 2 degrees Celsius, using these assumptions, it would require 300,000 billion joules of energy, which is 3 times 10 to the 14 joules. This is the amount of energy consumed by the entire United Kingdom in 1 second. And if you think about it, the energy that Groudon outputs would disperse around the rest of the world and also radiate out into space. So therefore Groudon would need to constantly output this energy. So therefore Groudon would need the same energy production as the entire of the United Kingdom, which I don't think is possible to come out of a single Pokemon of that scale. So what is Groudon doing to change the environment? Well, there's a particular effect which is a large contributor to a global issue which has been under lots of debate in previous years, which is the greenhouse effect, which leads to global warming. Now, global warming or climate change has been under much debate. However, greenhouse effect is a well-known scientific effect. To understand the greenhouse effect, you need to understand the fact that the photons coming from the sun which heat up the Earth can take two possible paths once they reach the Earth. So the first one is to hit the Earth and be absorbed by the Earth. The second one is to hit the Earth, be absorbed by the Earth, but then re-emit it, essentially being reflected back into outer space. However, some of the photons which are re-emitted back from the Earth to outer space can be intercepted by the upper atmosphere and be reabsorbed by the upper atmosphere, then re-emitted back down towards Earth. Now, if this happens more, therefore there's more of a chance that a particular photon will be absorbed by the Earth, therefore the Earth would warm up more. And the greenhouse gases in the upper atmosphere increase the chance of a re-emitted photon from the Earth to be reabsorbed and re-emitted back down towards the Earth. Therefore, the overall temperature of the Earth increases by decreasing the amount of energy lost. This is a good idea, but how would Groudon increase the amount of greenhouse gases in the upper atmosphere? It cannot store that much gas in its body, and as we know, it cannot create that much gas because it will require so much energy, similar to the calculation that we came up with before. So what does it do? It must somehow use its environment around it. Hoenn is an active volcanic area, and as you may have seen from a few videos on YouTube of things falling into active volcanoes, It's quite easy to cause a small eruption in an active volcano as the pressures and the temperatures are so high underneath the ground. So a strong Pokemon like Groudon could rupture the ground and maybe cause a small volcanic eruption of lava to spew into maybe a nearby forest, because there's lots of forests around the volcano in Hoenn, and therefore maybe cause a forest fire which will emit lots of carbon dioxide into the upper atmosphere, and this links back into the greenhouse effect as explained before. So now we have a working theory for what Groudon can do and how Groudon can change its environment. So let's apply this theory to Kyogre. So to have an opposite effect from Groudon, Kyogre must do the opposite thing to Groudon, so therefore must decrease the amount of carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases in the upper atmosphere. Kyogre itself can't really absorb all these gases itself. As I mentioned before, with Groudon it would take far too much energy and volume, so Kyogre must also take advantage of its environment to change the atmosphere. So Kyogre lives in the ocean, and algae, which is a species of microscopic organisms, quite like plant life, lives on the surface of water, including the ocean. And because the ocean is the largest surface in the world, you may know that they are known to be one of the most prominent species in the world, because you can actually see algae blooms from outer space. Because of the vast amount of algae in the ocean, algae have a large effect on the environment, and if you can change the population of algae, you can change the environment greatly. One of the limiting factors of the growth of the population of algae is the amount of phosphorus abundant in the ocean. Phosphorus is an element found abundant in the mantle of the Earth. And as I mentioned before, Hoenn's quite a volcanically active area. So if Kyogre was to cause small volcanic eruptions at the bottom of the ocean, that would increase the concentration of phosphorus in the ocean, therefore increase the population of algae on the ocean, and therefore via the photosynthesis of the algae, decrease the amount of carbon dioxide in the upper atmosphere, and therefore reverse the greenhouse effect. So now we have a working theory as to how Kyogre and Groudon change the environment of the Hoenn region. Groudon causes small volcanic eruptions on the land, which cause forest fires, which increase the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and cause the greenhouse effect. And Kyogre causes small volcanic eruptions at the bottom of the ocean, which increases the amount of phosphorus in the ocean, which increases the amount of algae on the ocean, which decreases the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. In reality, this would take place in much longer timescales than in the game. However, it is a game and we need to take it with a pinch of salt, and it probably just speeds up the process to make the game more interesting, because you don't want to be waiting 10 years after you send out Groudon to make its drought take effect. When you apply this theory to the Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald games, the conflicts between the Team Aqua and Team Magma are deeper than they first seemed. They reflect current affairs surrounding global warming in the real world, rather than how much water or land there is. So this is just my theory, and scientific theories are meant to be improved upon, so if you have any ideas or input on this theory, feel free to leave a comment down below, and additionally, if you have any questions you'd like a scientific answer to, feel free to leave a comment about that. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.